Ray Lindsay, the Logistics and Facility Manager at the Museum Support Center, and Leslie Ryan, the Center's Supervisory Curator, join me this morning. Good morning, guys.
Good morning. How you doing, Cliff?
We're doing well. So happy to have both of you with us today. Oftentimes when we think about our tenant organizations, they're just a face and people don't get to see what's behind the scenes. So tell us, what is the mission behind the Museum Support Center?
The Museum Support Center's mission is threefold. We're part of the Center of Military History, and the Center of Military History is tasked with documenting the history of the U.S. Army. This is done at our main office through archives, documents, books that our researchers do and prepare, and also photodocumentary evidence. For our office, our job is to document the history of the U.S. Army using items that were issued to our soldiers, captured by our soldiers, so that we can see the growth and development of technology that our Army has had over the years. In addition, we also then support approximately 50 Army museums nationwide, and now we are supporting the National Museum of the U.S. Army. We help them with the development of exhibits to educate our soldiers, their families, and visitors from throughout the United States and abroad. And then our other missions include keeping artifacts that our museums in the field don't have enough storage space for. Those are now brought here and curated on site here in Anniston. And we also assist activating and inactivating Army units with the turn-in and then the return of their unit heraldic property, which is their flags, and then their regular unit property, which would include, say, silverware sets. So we're a very multifunctional office.
Okay. Ray, how many buildings do you occupy? And tell us a little bit about the types of artifacts that are stored there.
Okay, we have a total of probably about approximately 8 buildings that we support the enterprise with. And like Leslie said, we got about 50 active duty museums we support, and those artifacts are mainly at Building 813 out in the restricted area. In the restricted area, I think we have a total of 5 buildings in the restricted area and 2 over on the east side over here, which our main building is Building 201, which is a climate control building that we actually store the artifacts in.
There are many memories, Ray, back in the Building 201. That was once my first home.
Oh, yeah. I tell everyone, when we go through and give tours of the building of 201, we have a big warehouse in the back, and I call it Noah's Ark. And if you remember the last scene in the Noah's Ark, that's what you take away from that as well.
Yes, and that property is once where Terrace Home Apartments was located.
Yes.
So back in the 80s, out went Terrace Homes and construction of the Museum Support Center took place.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Talk to us a little bit about the storage requirements.
For the storage requirement right now, we have to maintain the humidity in the building anywhere from 68 to 72 degrees. Humidity, and we have, with temperature and humidity, is mainly range about 45 to 50% humidity in the building at all times when we keep the artifacts there.
Okay, well, you guys got a lot of stuff stored. So, Leslie, I know you don't do this with a one-man band. Tell us a little bit about that highly skilled staff you have.
Well, we do. We have a very highly skilled staff. At one point in time, we had approximately 3 people on staff. Now we have over 10 staff members there at MSCA to keep everything going. Our staff members' educational backgrounds, they come to us from primarily the humanities fields, from history, anthropology, archaeology. We also have people with backgrounds in chemistry who are doing conservation reports for us on tanks and other macro artifacts. Many of our people also come to us with backgrounds in museum studies. So they are able to then very easily pick up and have that training. Our staff who don't have museum studies backgrounds, we have support from our main office in Washington, who every year puts on an educational training program, which is the basic museum training class, which is we're going to be sending some of our newer staff members to this April. At that class, they will learn the basics of our computer system. We have a standalone computer program which we track over 150,000 artifacts in. So they learn that. They learn about the need to wear gloves when holding the artifacts so as not to get whatever chemicals may be on the artifacts on them, but also then vice versa, not to transfer the chemicals from the hands, their oils and stuff, onto the artifacts. So everybody comes to us from several different backgrounds, but all a common background with an interest of history and the Army history system and preserving Army artifacts.
And why do we store Army artifacts? What's the significance there?
What we are doing is, as I said, at our main office, we have we have a historian section, and they are actually writing the histories of the U.S. Army. By having artifacts, we're actually showing people three-dimensional objects that are representing the development, the actual development of technology in the Army. We have numerous different types of uniforms in our office, lots of different types of small arms, showing the development of small arms. So we're actually documenting it through the use of objects.
Okay. Well, you support the National Museum of the Army, which is being constructed at Fort Belvoir. Tell us about this museum and your organization's role.
Okay. NAMUSA, as we call it, it sits on approximately 84 acres at Fort Belvoir. It has its own historical foundation, which is fundraising. When complete, the structure will be approximately 185,000 feet, and it will have a parade ground and auditoriums and amphitheaters. And they're predicting they will need to raise approximately $200 million to do this. So this will be a central location for people to come when they come to the D.C. area to get a good overview and feel for the development of the U.S. Army, for the campaigns that we have waged, and for the cost of our civilians who have gone into the Army, and to get us to where we are as such a great nation today.
Well, we know you've got a vast collection of artifacts over there. You brought just a couple to show our work for us. Let's talk about them. Can we show some of them and their significance?
Sure. We have some of our curators that come over with us, and we got a few artifacts that we have stored there, and we actually have on display. They're not on display. We bring it out for inventory, and then we take tours and we put it on display for the tours.
Okay. Well, give us a sneak peek behind the scenes.
Okay. I have Mr. John Garner's up first. He's going to talk about a jacket that we have and the significance of the jacket. He got a couple other artifacts he'll show you.
Okay.
This one right here is a Hitler Youth summer jacket. This is something most people may not be able to see if they go to a normal museum talking about World War II history, because these are children essentially being used for society and geared towards war. So kind of like the Boy Scouts, the Hitler Youth started in 1922 and began as a youth organization. But over time, as Hitler gets into power by 1933, he's going to start making sure that all the other youth groups, like the Boy Scout and some others, are banned, and this is the only group you can be part of as a young teenage boy. And as you see here, this one's got several insignia for various things, kind of like a merit badge if you want to go back to the Boy Scouts right here for the pink wheel for motorists. The leadership cord here, basically like a sergeant for the troops or the cadets. So this one is unique because it shows how the Nazis were trying to mobilize all aspects of society for their ideology, for their war front. And by 1943, a lot of the 18-year-olds in the Hitler Youth, or I should say really more like 17, they're going to start using them directly into combat, trying to get them as troops as soon as possible because they are running out of soldiers. So it's kind of a darker side of the history showing how children being used. There's a German youth group that goes from about the age of 12, or I should say 10 to 13 to 14. So that's a younger side of the Hitler Youth. And there's also a contingent for the girls as well.
Okay. Interesting.
Right here, from the same time period, we have something that looks not quite as significant at first, piece of barbed wire. We see a lot of barbed wire around here, used for cattle, keeping things out. This type of artifact, well, barbed wire was invented in America, 1870s, developed 1880s, but this piece right here comes from the Dachau concentration camp. So has a very different sort of history than a lot of things we find. Doesn't look like much, but does have very important significance because Dachau was the first concentration camp developed by the Nazis in 1933. So just as Hitler's coming to power, the Nazis are in power, they start developing a system for how to house and deal with political prisoners. So that's the first stage of the use of Dachau, and then it becomes more designed for the Jews, and they're going to start shifting over to their other plans, and of course become the center for genocide. So Dachau becomes the major place where they develop the system for all the concentration camps throughout German territory and others, and so every guard that has to go out to the other camps must go through Dachau, have their training there, and then go out. So it's the center of this whole regime, this whole system for corralling people. And so this little piece here has a very different sort of history, but it's very important so we can tell a story about how the Nazis used these type of camps. And of course, by 1945, we'll end Dachau's history, its operation, and the troops will be able to make sure all of these camps are shut down. So it does tell a very darker story, the side of the war.
Okay. You brought up anything additional?
Next up will be Cindy Nemeth. She's our small arms expert, so she'll talk about some weapons here.
This is like show and tell. We're always excited to have guests who bring visuals.
Leading into where John was talking about the youth movement in World War II, I've brought two examples of a Carcano carbine. One is the adult model. Then you have what they call the youth model. This was used to train the fascist youth in World War II. This was geared for boys between the ages of 8 and 12. And they indoctrinated them by teaching them to use. It actually has a functioning bayonet. It is the exact replica of the adult model. The other thing that I brought this morning was a belt buckle. This is a belt buckle that would have been worn by a German officer. But the secret behind this belt buckle is it's not just a belt buckle. It's also a pistol. So what would happen is he would pop the gun, which it has 5 barrels or 4 barrels, and each one has their own trigger going down the side, and each one would fire a bullet. So this would have been hidden and nobody would have known it was there. You can close it back up. But it would be a single shot for each chamber. So you would have 4 actual shots with this one. The last item that I brought would also be carried by a German officer. It's what they call a broom handle. The pistol is actually, this is the holster, but it actually turns it into a shoulder-fired gun. So this would be the pistol. You could use it alone by itself. This one is significant because of the 9, which means it indicates that this would be a 9mm, which is not a common caliber for the Germans. Most of their stuff was 7.62. But then you can take this wooden holster and you would attach it to the pistol, and it turns it into a shoulder-fired weapon.
Interesting.
So these are just some of the examples of some of the small arms that we have.
Well, we thank you so much for show and tell this morning. We know that you have many, many items, patches, other articles of clothing, weapons, tanks, and this is just a snippet of what's in store.
We couldn't actually roll a tank in here.
Truly understand that. Well, lastly, Ray, we thank you guys and the team for joining us this morning. We realize that there's so much to go on your in the museum facilities, and thank you for sharing with our workforce.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you so much.